Hey, this is Mike Cazu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. This week's guest is the best 58 kilo lifter in American history and the new head coach of Brute Oly, Jessica Lucero. We're back for round two. This time we're talking about her experience at Olympic trials last year, where she had the single best performance of her entire life and barely missed qualifying for the Olympics. So we go into depth about that experience, as well as how she prepares for gearing up for 4 long years until she gets another shot at the next Olympics. This show was a blast to hear the kind of the inside story of her experience, as well as behind the scenes of what it takes to make it to the Olympics in such a competitive sport. Enjoy the show. Hey, this is Mike Cazu, and you're listening to the Brute Strength Podcast. I'm back for round two with Jessica Lucero. Jess, thank you so much for making time for me today.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
So I want to start out, I want to go back to the national championship last year. This was really the culmination of your entire 12 plus year career. It was the single biggest competition of your life because it also acted as the Olympic trials. After being in this sport for so long, what did it feel like the, say, week or two or even month leading up to that competition?
It's kind of hard. I mean, I can only describe it in like emotional descriptions because it was so crazy. Like if it was like a really like desperate feeling all the time, where I mean, I knew what numbers I needed to do to make the team. And so every day in training, I was thinking about those. And like, I mean, you do that anyways. Like you have your number goals and you have your, you know, whatever. But it was kind of like a make or break. Like if you hit these, you go. If you don't hit them, you don't go. And so it was kind of like a really, I guess, desperate feeling of like, just do whatever it takes to get to those numbers by that date, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting. Why do you say the word desperate? What's underneath that?
I think that looking back, I think I'm really glad that I went through that because I learned a lot of like do's and don'ts. And that I think is one of them. But that's like, in all honesty, how I was feeling because I felt like I had been in the sport for so long. Like I know how my body was feeling. I didn't know if I would, you know, continue on to the next Olympic quad. I didn't know if I could go on to the next Olympic quad. So I felt like it was kind of like all or nothing. And it was like, this is the only chance. Like I wanted to approach it like this is it, you know? And this was the first time that I was like truly in the mix. Like in 2012, I had hit lifts in training that were like good enough to be in the mix, but wasn't good enough to make the team. But I also like wasn't mentally ready at that point to like be able to fight and compared to how I was in this Olympic trials. So yeah, I mean, but even from this one, like I said, I feel like I still learned a lot of things that I won't bring into the next quad. But yeah, that's really how it felt. Like I either made it or it was over, you know?
Right. So I want to talk about that actual competition, but first off, let's talk about leading up to it on that day. Who was there and what did y'all do on the day of the competition before it started?
So who was there? A lot of my friends from Colorado came out to watch me. I don't know if you know, she's a CrossFit Games athlete, Becky Konzelman, came. My good friend Ziana Hansen with Barbells for Boobs came, and her son, and my entire family, like my uncle. Well, not my entire family, I guess, because my grandpa doesn't like to fly, and he had cancer at the time, and so he couldn't fly, but he was watching online. But my mom and my brother and my uncle and my husband, and then all my coaches, Adi Cazu, my nutrition coach, and
who's that?
Yeah, just this lady. I don't know. You might not know her. Yeah, and then my coaches.
Awesome. So what did you woke up and you did what? What did that day look like for you?
Well, it was kind of a weird competition because it was the Olympic trials, but also the national championships. All the other athletes that were competing at the national championships were going earlier in the week. So I lifted on Sunday night, where typically at a national championships, I would lift, Friday night or Saturday morning at the latest, in the mix with like the different sessions in my weight class. But because we had our own like designated Olympic trials where all the girls that qualified for Olympic trials and were trying to make the Olympic teams lifted together, regardless of your weight class, we kind of had like all day to sit around and wait. And the men's Olympic trials went first. So I remember in the morning, I always do like a morning warm up session where I kind of just like get some blood flow moving around and stuff. And so I did that. And then I remember going into the hot tub just to swim around and like not be like sitting all day. And I remember when I was at the pool, the 58 girls were lifting. And so my coach was texting me. She's like, "Hey, I'm watching. Do you want to know what they're doing or do you care?" And I'm like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, I'm really focused on what's happening later on in the day. And then I came back, and it was so funny because normally Christian and I stay together, my husband, and at a competition, and like the whole morning kind of goes like pretty fast, and we just kind of sit and talk, or I watch a movie or something. Like, it's super chill. But for some reason at this competition, I didn't want to do anything. Like, I didn't want to listen to music. I didn't want to watch a movie. I didn't want to read. I didn't want to do any of the normal things. I just seriously just sat there in silence. Like, when I got back from the pool, I just sat in silence and didn't talk. I didn't want to listen to Christian talk. I was just like sitting there and like zoning out. And it was just kind of a surreal, weird thing because I was just like so ready for what was going to happen to be my time to make it happen. And I didn't want to be distracted,
Absolutely. So were you just mentally rehearsing the entire like warm up and competition over and over and over? What was going through your mind?
It was completely empty. I don't know.
Wow.
I'm not that type of person who's like, it's really easy for them to kind of not think. I'm definitely a thinker, and it's almost something that I have to really work on all the time. But that day I was like in the zone from wake up till I went to bed that night. And I just wasn't thinking about a single thing at all.
So you had to hit American records to even have a shot at making the team.
Yeah.
Was there increased pressure from that, or do you feel like that's part of what just put you in this zone, as you call it?
I don't know that I processed the fact that those lifts would have been American records. I think that it was kind of like it was just a number, like our original plan was to open with 91 because we knew a lot of the other girls that had qualified for the Olympic trials were going to be snatching and opening around 90. And so we were like, just to set us apart, we're going to open with 91 just to like, which is a heavy opener for me because
just to clarify, that's 91 kilos, which is what, like right at 200 pounds?
Yeah, like maybe, yeah, I think so. Like 200
You're
exactly.
a 58 kilo lifter, so you weigh what in pounds?
127.
Cool.
Yeah. And my American record that I had broken before that in the snatch was 92. So it was like only a kilo underneath my all-time best. And I don't think that I was like nervous about opening that heavy or anything. I was just like part of the plan. It was just like, this is what I need to do. Okay. Like, and then the American records themselves, it didn't really like, it wasn't like, oh, cool, I get to break American records or people are going to be excited. It like literally didn't even cross my mind. It was just like, I need to do 95 and 120. Like that was the only thing I was thinking about. So yeah, it's kind of weird because like at other competitions, the numbers matter, I guess, but they're not as like, they're kind of like bonuses. Like, oh, cool, I get an opportunity to do an American record. And like, it's a proud thing, but it's not like, but it is kind of a bigger deal. Where at the Olympic trials, the end goal was so different than just like breaking an American record, or even going 6 for 6. So it was just a different approach, I guess, that I had to take mentally.
So take us through the whole meet, because it was very, very exciting competition.
Yeah. Well, okay. First, if you don't mind, I'm gonna like kind of build up to it, because
please.
It's funny that I'm not normally like a super nervous lifter, in the sense that I'm like scared of what's going to happen or anything. I'm kind of like usually more like anxious because I'm so excited to go. And this competition, I was like a scared deer in headlights. Like every single day at training, like the whole week, I was so emotional, like irrationally emotional for like the 2 months leading into it, just because I understood what this could mean. Like it was something that I had been working for my entire life. And that was like a turning point competition. I was either going to fulfill all my goals in the sport, or I was going to have to like go back to the drawing board and keep working. And so it was kind of like a huge thing for me emotionally. And also Christian was preparing for the regionals, the California regionals for CrossFit, and his was like a week after mine. So like training environment wise was super weird. I was a remote coached athlete at the time. I was living in Southern California, and my coach was in Northern California at the time. And I was like going back and forth from being with my husband and training in the CrossFit gym to going up and training with my coach in NorCal and my team, and staying with her, and like just really trying to stay as dialed in as possible to do everything I can outside of training right to give myself the best chance. So I was like the most disciplined that I've ever been in that period of time. And so and I remember like Christian and I would get in, not like fights really, but I would be really sad and have like really weird expectations for him that I wouldn't normally have, just because I felt all this pressure and I was so scared, and I like felt like I needed him so much more than normal. And so when we finally got to the competition, he was just like trying to be there for me and ignore the fact that he had a really big competition coming up. And so that's kind of like a super special, like cool thing that I'm like super proud that he was able to do for me, because I mean, it must have been hard for him.
Sure.
So when we finally got to the competition, all of that pressure and all that fear kind of like went away. I was just like, all right, we're here. I'm ready. Let's do it. And so when the competition started, we were warming up, and I remember the back room being so different than normal, because all of us girls were used to like traveling together for international competitions and things like that, and training together at national training camps and things. And we've seen each other around for years. Like we've been competing against each other for years. And so in that moment, we all like, I don't want to use the word hated each other, but like in that moment, we weren't friends. Like none of us.
Sure.
None of us were like, oh, hey, like I wasn't like going in there and saying hi to all of them and giving them hugs. It was like, we all went in, we all wanted that spot, and we all would do whatever it took to take it from that person. And so it was like a really weird energy in the back, and everyone was scared. And it was so obvious. Like there was a lot of missed warm-up attempts, and like I wasn't necessarily like looking around, but like you can hear what's going on in there. And I was definitely one of the people missing warm-up attempts. Like my snatches, I wouldn't say that I always miss a warm-up, but I wouldn't say I always make all my warm-ups either. And that it's not necessarily reflective of how I perform, but it was definitely an extra stressful warm-up situation because I did miss like more than a normal like situation. But we couldn't stray from the plan. It was like, all right, you missed 80, like find a way to make it because we're opening with 91, whether you like it or not. So yeah, like say I missed 80, then I would make it on the next one. And then we'd go up to, I don't know, 83. I honestly wasn't, I was like pacing the whole time, had music in. I wasn't really paying attention to the numbers that I was doing. So when then we went out for snatches, finally, I was like, okay, like, let's do this. It's time. Like, I know I have to at least do 93 and ideally do 95. That was like the goal. And so when I did 93, I missed my opener in front. No, behind. And then I was like, all right, we're fine. We're fine. Like, I felt it. I was like, it was really easy. I knew it was there. And then we went 93 anyways, because we had to set myself up for 95. And I missed it in front.
And this is, wait, this is on the floor?
On the competition floor, yes.
Yeah.
When I got to my opener, I missed it. And then we went up anyways because I had to. And I missed it again. And that was at the time would have broken the American record, my second attempt. And then my third attempt, we had to repeat 93 because we weren't like that comfortable. Like 93 was the minimum I had to do. And so we just decided to be more conservative and make it. And I just remember everybody else was freaking out, and I knew I was going to make it. I just knew. So I went out and I made it, and like everyone was freaking out and like crying and stuff. And they're like, okay, that's over. Like you still have to clean and jerk. Like get your head back in the game. And so we go back and we start warming up, and I remember panicking a little bit because it felt so heavy. And clean and jerks and warm ups, I never notice if it feels heavy or it feels light or anything. I never like put any attachment to that ever. And for some reason that day I was like, holy cow, like this feels so heavy. And then I remember taking my headphones off and asking Christian, I was like, how much is this? Like I was thinking it was like 95 kilos, and my best, we were planning on opening with 115 kilos. So I was like a little bit freaking out, you know? And he said, oh, that's 109. And I was like, oh, okay, we're fine. Let's go. Let's do this. Because then all of a sudden I was like, 109 should feel like that. I'm glad that it feels like that. But I was thinking it was 95 and that it was so much lighter and that I had so many more kilos to put on before it was time to open. But that gave me like this weird adrenaline rush. And then I was so excited to get out there. So that 109 was my last warm up. And then we decided to go 112. And right before I walked out to the platform, Amy was like, this will put you in the Olympic alternate spot. And so I went out and I nailed it. And then I came back and she was like, okay, we're going to go 115 and then we're going to go 120. So when we went 115, I was like, okay, this is going to put me on the team. I know it's going to put me on the team. I'm so excited. And then I smoked the clean. It was so easy that I like was so excited to do the jerk because I knew I was going to make it that I rushed it like really bad. And I know, and I missed it. And afterwards I was like, it's fine. That's so easy. And then if I make it, I'll be on the Olympic team. Like in my head, for some reason, that was like the weight I needed. I don't know why, because we knew the plan going in, but for some reason, that's what I thought. And so I go back and then they call me out and I do 115 and I smoke it. I nail it. And that was an American record. And actually, the American record previous to that was 113 kilos. And it was like 10 years before that day that it had been broken. So that American record was like one of the longest standing records that we had still in USA weightlifting. And so that was kind of a cool thing in retrospect. But like at the time I was just like, I'm on the Olympic team. and I like ran back and I was like all excited and crying. And like all the coaches were like congratulating me when I came back. And I really didn't understand what had happened until when they were announcing the Olympic team. And then USADA came up to me and they were like, okay, Jess, like you need to be drug tested. I'm like, well, I'm not going with you yet because they haven't announced the team. And then when they were announcing the team, they announced Morgan and Jenny and Sarah. And then I just like lost it. Like I just was bawling my eyes out, and I was like, I don't know. It was such a weird thing because I was like, oh, I wasn't good enough. But I literally did everything I could, because that day I didn't make a lot of lifts, but those were PRs for me. Like I had never done them in a competition. So it was like the most I could have done that day and the most I was prepared to do that day. So it was kind of a weird.
It's very weird. I don't think many people in the world can relate to that in any sport, because usually when you set like a national record, that means you're going to go to the next phase of competition. But this is just so tight, and there are so few spots that that's just how it ended up. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I remember, I think it was an NBC reporter, or there was some reporter in the back afterwards, and she was interviewing me, and she was asking me like how I felt and stuff, like after they had announced the Olympic team. And I was just like, it's like going to sound so corny, but I said, well, when you're shooting for the moon, sometimes if you don't make it, you'll still end up on a star. And I kind of feel like that's what happened to me. Like I was reaching for my end goal, and there's no reason for me to be disappointed that I didn't make it, because I still had a great day and I still gave it everything I could. And that's all you can do, really.
Absolutely. Do you feel proud of yourself?
Yeah, I do feel proud of myself, but it did also give me a lot of things to work on. Like, I think that I handled the nerves and stuff. I think the nerves affected me more in training and preparation for the competition than it did in the actual competition. And I think that if I was able to use that as that fear as an opportunity to have like adrenaline in training, to be able to have been more consistent leading up, I think that I would have been more consistent on game day, and I would have been able to attempt lifts that I had never done before ever. Like 115 I had done in a local competition like a month before that, but I had never done it at a national meet where it mattered. And I think that had I had been making that lift more consistently in training, because I was using the fear to my benefit instead of like being too scared and emotional that I didn't have any energy left for that lift in actual training, that I probably would have been able to be in a better position where I would have been more accurate on the first try, and I would have been calmer in that moment and been able to focus on what I was doing instead of being like looking forward, like what this lift means is this, and instead of being like, I need to make this jerk this way, like thinking about making sure I'm using my cues and not looking at the result of what that lift would mean,
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying staying present with your training.
Yeah. And I think that I, looking back, even though it was a really hard time and it took me a long time to learn the lesson, after the Olympic trials was over, I think that I wasn't ready to be at the Olympics. Like I was not in a place as an athlete that I feel comfortable saying that I was ready to be on that stage. And at that time I thought I was, which is why it hurt so much. But like looking back now, and the athlete that I am now, looking at that girl that was on that stage, I'm like, like it seemed like pure luck to me that I even made any lifts then, because I was so inconsistent in training, and I was just like relying completely on adrenaline on game day. And I need to be a better athlete than that. I need to be able to perform those lifts and those numbers regardless of circumstance. And I don't need to rely on adrenaline to be there or not be there to be able to make consistent lifts, and I had to learn that lesson kind of a hard way to figure it out.
Right. It takes what it takes. There's no rush in some of that stuff. So I think I know the answer to this, but was there ever any doubt in your mind as if you'd give it another shot at the Olympics?
No, definitely not.
It probably just fueled you even further, huh?
Yeah, it did. And because I was so close too, I feel like it gave me so much of a push because I'm already where I'm at, I already was where I was then, and I knew how much I could improve, and how much I needed to improve to be at the level I want to be at. And actually, at the time, my only goal was to qualify for the Olympics. And now when I look at it, I'm like, that's not good enough. Like, I don't want to just qualify for the Olympics to say I'm an Olympian. Like, I want to be a medalist at the Olympics. I want to be one of the best in the world at the Olympics. I want to be much better than just like someone who said that I qualified for the Olympics. Like, I want my goals to be bigger than that. And I was dreaming too small then. And I think it's kind of funny that like I was dreaming so small then and I fell short. And now like it seems like all these doors are open. Like I didn't get what I wanted then because I wasn't thinking or looking big enough.
Right. So you guys after that had a huge decision to make. You got the opportunity to, this is kind of along with what you're saying. You got the opportunity to move up to Oregon to train with Amy Everett, and which is your coach. And Christian nearly won the California Super Regional and got injured, had to pull out because of an injury. And his coach and his training community was in SoCal.
Yeah. So
you had to choose where to live. How did y'all navigate through that decision?
Honestly, it was a super easy decision for me because in 2015, we made the decision to move from Denver to Christian's coach in Costa Mesa. And then I was already living away from Amy. So it was just like still living away from Amy and just continuing to do what we were doing. And a lot of my teammates after the Olympic trials asked me like, do you think that you can make the Olympics not being with your coach? And I said, I'm not saying that you can't, but I'm saying that you will succeed. Like your chances of succeeding are much higher if you're giving yourself everything you need to be successful. And living away from your coach definitely put a strain on some things. Like it added a lot of stress to my training. For example, I had to be in charge of my movement. I had to be in charge of knowing why I was missing and figuring that out, because I couldn't just text her and be like, what do I do next? And then expect her to be able to respond right away. And I had to make those decisions and those calls on my own and figure it out on my own. And there were a lot of days where those are hard decisions to make. Like if you're hurting and you're not sure if it's one of those days that you should push through or you shouldn't push through, it's just a lot more stressful of a situation to have to make those decisions on your own than to allow your coach who knows what her plan is and knows what the long-term goals are for her to make that decision for you. It's just so much easier that way. And then, me having a training environment that wasn't even that helpful towards Olympic trials or the Olympics or the World Championships, it's like not comparable in what to expect there. For example, I'm lifting in the weightlifting area and it's completely alone. There's not a soul there, but I can hear all the other CrossFit athletes in the CrossFit area, like laughing and having fun and training and like being silly and like still getting their work in and stuff, but having like people to be around. And then me having resentment in that room because like I feel left out or I feel lonely or I feel like no one cares about me or all these like stupid emotions that you shouldn't need to feel during training, like that don't matter during training. So,
but they were real for you. So
they were.
I don't believe that there are any like good or bad emotions. Like everything we feel for a reason. And you were, you were kind of on an island, and that was your reality.
Right. Yeah. And it was a really stressful time in my career, and there was a lot of pressure on me, and like that, what I said, like I felt really desperate. And so those emotions were a lot more heightened because of that. Like I felt like I needed help, and I didn't feel like anyone was helping me except my coach, of course, but she's so far away that there's like only so much that she can do. So after the Olympic trials, I was like making the decision, like, Christian, I'm going to be spending more time than not in Oregon with my coach, because I need to give myself the best opportunity for this next quad that I possibly can. I don't want to look back and be like, well, maybe if I was with Amy the last 2 years full time, that I would have been in better shape, or I would have been more consistent, or I would have made the Olympics. I don't want to have that in the back of my mind, like, what if? And Christian was supportive of it, and I had made that sacrifice to move to Costa Mesa with him before, and he had the success in 2016 that I was hoping we both would have success in. And so we were just kind of trying to navigate whether or not we both should go, or if we should just live separate for a few years, like just make that sacrifice. And so for the last like year and a half, we have been living apart. And then just after the national championships this year in 2017, he decided that he wanted to come up and live with me, and he didn't want us to be apart, and that he would make this sacrifice for now, and then we'll reevaluate it after 2020 Olympics.
Husband of the year.
Yeah, it was nice.
What's been the biggest benefit for you being physically with Amy, in your opinion?
Well, for starters, she's the first person to be like, all right, you look like you're really unrecovered. Let's change your workout a little bit. And that's huge, because when I was in California, no one could see that. I would try to ignore what I was feeling about my body, because, I didn't know if it was like real or not, because as an athlete, sometimes you do make stuff up in your head if you're, a little bit tired or whatever. Like, that's a normal thing. You should be tired, and you should feel sore, and you should feel beat up. Like that, you're an elite athlete, you're going to be hurting a little bit. And so I was just like, okay, I just hurt. Like, that's just how it is. Mm-hmm. We're like, now Amy will see I'm hurting, but I'm also not moving in the way that she wants me to be moving. And it's not worth like, continuing to push that movement and create these bad habits or bad motor patterns. And so we'll just change the workout a little bit so that you can still get a lot out of this workout without, hurting yourself in the long run. That's been a huge thing. And then she's like super controlling about my recovery and things. And before, I was super neurotic about making sure I did all the recovery stuff I had access to in California. But here she's like, you need to get a massage, and she'll like go out and find me a massage person and like have them come to the house and massage me, and like and chiropractic and all of those like things that I didn't have access to in California, because there was just, there was just so many. It was just, everything was just so much more expensive there, for example. And here it's a little bit more manageable, where I can get consistent care. And she makes sure that I'm doing that. Where like in California, it was really easy to be like, oh, it's too expensive, I'll just do it like once a month. And then I'll just like try to cut myself, or I'll roll out twice a day, and I'll stretch twice a day, like just the stuff that I can do manually, I did every day, but now I have like the external help.
Right. So the quad, the time between each Olympic meet is 4 years, which is an incredibly long time. CrossFitters, a lot of CrossFitters, they'll get motivated after the regionals or the games. Mm-hmm. And then within 3 or 4 months, they lose motivation. They can't even like stay motivated until the open, right? But you have to maintain this motivation for 4 years.
Yeah.
What do you do on days when you're feeling low motivation, self-doubt, all of those types of things? How do you keep showing up?
Well, I'll be honest, there is a lot of ups and downs with that within a training cycle. Even like our national events that we have, like we did the national championships, but the competition I did before that it was in December, and then I didn't compete again until May. So like that's still a good amount of time. Like, so I do have ups and downs throughout that training cycle. I guess for me, I've been lifting for so long now that like it's almost a habit. Like even if I'm having self-doubt, I still go in and I still put in the work, and that's the only thing I can control, and that's the only thing I allow myself to focus on. And I guess it's more like if I catch myself feeling unmotivated or something like that, I have the tools from the experience to be able to talk myself out of, that self-doubt or that self-talk. Mm-hmm. And really relying on, in those times, on routine is super helpful for me. And I have a sports psychologist, and I definitely take advantage of that. It is hard. I'm not going to pretend that it's not it's not like super glamorous where like I'm just super pumped every day and it's a movie montage every week. It's not like that. There's a lot of days where a lot of days that turn into weeks where I feel self-doubt and insecure, and I question why I'm doing this and if I want to do this. But I just always come back to, when it comes down to it, I'll ask myself, okay, then just quit. If you really are this insecure and this scared and this unhappy, then just quit. And then when I say that to myself, I'm like, it's kind of a reality check. Like, I put in so much time to this goal. I would not be okay just walking away for a reason that I feel I could overcome. It's not worth it.
Absolutely.
So
I was talking to the sports psychologist of the Red Sox and Browns, a friend of mine, Justin Sua, recently, and he talked about this, like the difference, but one of the biggest difference between professionals and amateurs is that professionals don't need to feel a certain way to show up and put in the work, right? Despite feeling low motivation or fear or whatever it may be, they continue taking the same exact actions day in and day out that like you said, that they can control.
That's so funny too, because wording it like that, I wrote it in my journal maybe like last week about how there's a lot of times that I'll even go to compete and I won't feel recovered or I won't feel ready. Feeling ready is like the funniest thing to me, because if you have to feel ready, then you're setting yourself up for failure, because you don't have control of that. Like, that's not something that you can just be like, yeah, your coach's responsibility is to prepare you in the best way that they can. And then your responsibility is to recover as much as possible. But like, your body, it's not something that you can be like, okay, I'm going to be ready on this date because I'm doing exactly the same thing I did at the last competition or whatever the situation is. And I remember writing that in my journal saying, like, you don't have to feel ready or feel good to compete. You just have to work.
Right. I like that.
Yeah. If you show up like every day at training, you're not going to feel great, but you still make lifts, right? That's the same thing at a competition. There's no difference. It's just that more people are watching.
Right. You don't have to feel good to do your absolute best.
Yeah.
On the podcast we just did together, we talked about the example of Michael Jordan winning one of those championship games while he had the flu. Yeah. Have you heard that story?
Yeah, I have.
And obviously he felt awful, and he had one of the best games of his entire life. So it just goes to show you that when you're either you have a nagging injury or you're filled with self-doubt and fear, you can not only like survive that competition, but you can thrive in it.
Yeah. I mean, it's literally only about your attitude in that situation. Like if I go into a competition and I'm like, I don't feel ready, I feel like my body really hurts still and whatever, and I'm constantly concerned about that, then I'm not going to be thinking about like mentally the things I need to be saying to myself to be successful, instead of being like, all right, it is what it is. This is what my body gave me today. How can I make this a great day? And that's what you should be thinking about, like the proactive thought process, I guess, to be successful.
Right. The actions you can take to move towards your goal. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about nationals this year. I think it was the best meet of your life. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, everyone says that. Amy.
So tell us about it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, technically, I did the exact same total that I did at the Olympic trials, but I made way more lifts. I was way more consistent. My movement has improved so much since the Olympic trials. And I don't know. I was just really proud of my effort and my mental state and the approach that I took. And my favorite part about this competition is that in January, at the American Open in December, I missed a snatch in like this super weird way. And my only goal at that meet was to go 6 for 6 because we weren't going that heavy. And like, it should have been an easy thing for me to do, is just make all my lifts and like, whatever, it's not a big deal. But on my second snatch, I was like, I caught it a little bit off and I was fighting for it too long. And I missed the snatch in kind of a weird, awkward way. And so I kind of hyperextended my wrist, and I had been having like a lot of pain in my wrist for like months after that happened. And then I started to get really bad back spasms, and like my body just felt like it was falling apart. And like, I was like, I'm not going to be able to make it another 4 years. I was like, I remember distinctly talking to Amy about it and being like, maybe I'm just too old. Like maybe I just can't go another 4 years. And so anyways, I still kept working and I kept doing my best and just kept showing up. And then slowly I started to build that confidence back and my body started to heal. And then my training started going amazing. And then next thing I knew, we were 4 weeks out. And then all of a sudden I was super excited to compete, where, you know, a couple months before that, I was like, maybe I should quit. Maybe I'm not, able to do this anymore. And so it was kind of funny because when I dropped my last clean and jerk at nationals this year, I walked up and I gave Amy and Greg a hug, and Amy's like crying and cheering and like screaming at the crowd for me. And then Greg just like whispers in my ear and he's like, aren't you glad you didn't quit? And I was just laughing. I was like, yeah, that it just put everything into perspective. Like you're going to go through seasons like that. And it's all about like your reaction, like we were talking about earlier. But yeah, I did have a really good meet and I was really proud of it. And I only missed one lift, and it was an American record attempt in the snatch. And I had hit it in training, but only once. So I wasn't like super consistent with it or anything. So I'm excited to have another opportunity at that lift. And then I broke another American record in the snatch. In the clean and jerk, and then tied my total record.
Boom. That is awesome. I love that. That's a perfect transition. I want to talk a little bit about coaching before we shut it down.
Okay.
Recently, you joined the Brute team as the head coach of Brute Oly.
Yeah.
And you know the concept or the saying something to the effect that to master something is to teach it.
Yeah.
So what have you learned by coaching these athletes as well as any other athletes that you've coached? What's one of the biggest things you've learned?
I think that the biggest thing that I've learned from coaching other athletes is like how to approach teaching the movements under any emotional state, and like learning how people, like even how to talk to myself in certain situations. But what I've noticed with movements is that it's really easy to get overwhelmed with the lifts. Like it is, especially when you're learning. And I think that I learned from coaching how to approach that in the best way without under coaching or over coaching, and then still being able to be there for them emotionally through the process. And with me as an athlete, I know that I am a perfectionist and I want to be perfect. And so it's really hard to swallow if, I am not perfect in that lift. And sometimes I'll make a lift and it's super sloppy and ugly. And then Amy's like, great job, good job. And I'm always so annoyed because I'm like, it wasn't a great job. Like, don't say that. But now that I'm coaching these athletes, I can see why that's so important to still give encouragement, even if it isn't perfect, and give small cues as you go instead of teaching everything at once and then them being super overwhelmed and defeated. And yeah, so
why specifically do you think it's beneficial to give that encouragement rather than just give the constructive feedback, using Amy and you, for instance, giving you the constructive feedback of how you can improve the lift?
Well, I'm a perfectionist, like I was saying, so I'm already going to be down on myself and I'm already judging myself and I'm already analyzing things, and I already do that to myself. And then having a coach that's going to do that on top of it is almost overkill. And so when she's gives me an encouragement, it's okay to be proud that you made the lift. It's okay that it wasn't perfect. It's okay because now you can learn from it. It's an opportunity to grow, and it's not necessarily you're the worst lifter in the world. And because weightlifting is such a up and down sport in that sense, where it is a lot of thinking and a lot of accuracy and a lot of pressure on being perfect, that it's just as important to be happy with where you're at right now than to have goals for where you want to be in 4 years or 1 year or the next competition. And so I think that's important to develop in the beginning stages of coaching or your relationship with your athlete, so that they remember, because it's really easy to forget to be proud of where you're at right now.
Right. What's been the biggest surprise for you during this whole experience
with coaching?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that the biggest surprise was when I was kind of figuring out what pieces of coaching I like, and just the whole thing. I was kind of surprised that I loved it as much as I did. I kind of thought I would be one of those athletes that, did what she wanted to do in the sport, got as successful as possible for me as a person, and then I'd be out and I wouldn't come back to weightlifting and I wouldn't be in the community anymore. I would just move on, live on a beach somewhere, do yoga and check out of weightlifting and just not be in that community anymore. But I've learned now that I'm coaching how much I love it and how much I want to give back to the sport. And now my mind is I don't know if it's because I'm getting older or what, but my mind's just going kind of crazy about different fun things, not fun, different goals I have within the sport that don't necessarily have to do with my athletic career.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything you've changed your mind about in the past? Well, since you started coaching, that it could be related to technique or general weightlifting philosophy or anything at all?
Yes. I've changed my mind a lot, actually, with a lot of things. I feel like I've learned a lot about programming in the last few years, just from watching Amy's program over the years. And, Greg used to be my coach and I paid attention then too. And when Zygmunt was my coach and Danny Camargo, with all my coaches, I really wanted to learn a lot from them. I was more curious at the time, but now I think I used to think I had it all figured out. If I was to be a coach, this is the approach that I think is correct. And then watching how Amy coaches me and stuff, I think that I think that there's not one way that works best for everyone, and that I'll have to constantly be changing per athlete I have, like philosophy. I think that some athletes at certain ages can handle like tons of volume, and that it's really great for them. And then for other athletes, they really can't handle that, and it's not necessarily a bad thing and that they're going to be a bad athlete because of it, but they need a different approach to be the most successful as possible. And they don't have to be doing, 6 weeks of back squats with 10 reps at heavy percentages. Like, it's not necessary for them, and they can still be a really great athlete with doing that. I think I've also changed my mind a lot about like my approach as an athlete. Like, I used to think I had to be so focused on one thing, and I shouldn't think about the future, and I shouldn't be like giving myself too many distractions within training. Like I used to think you could only do two things, either in your sport, either working or going to school. It was like one or the other. And now that I'm a little bit older, I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think like at certain times of the year, like during the Olympic trials, I for sure won't go to school and work and train. I'll probably like minimize it down to like training and working or something like that. But I'm allowing myself to do everything right now because I'm still able to handle it. And as long as I'm good with my time management and I'm aware of my mental state at all times, and I'm not allowing like school to stress me out while I'm in training, or, any of those, or like me not be able to train because I have so much schoolwork, as long as I'm not allowing those kinds of things to happen, or like skipping a massage because I wanted to make sure that I Skyped one of my athletes on Brute or something, like any of those things, as long as all my priorities are in line, I think that I can still handle doing all of them. And that's not something that I used to think I could do.
Right. There's a quote I heard recently. If you don't have time, then you don't have priorities.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
I love it.
It's because we try to fit in so much that's when we really feel like we don't have time. But when you break it down into 2 to 3 things like you're talking about and weed out everything else, then so much is actually possible.
Yeah.
But it's like a skill, just like anything else, right? Getting to that place where we're so clear about what matters to us and getting rid of everything else.
Yeah. And like, I don't know how many athletes I've had that's told me like, oh, I didn't have time to go to the gym today. I'm like, well, I don't understand how you didn't have time to go to the gym today. Like, how did you not plan your day around like, okay, you work every day from this time to this time. Maybe you have a meeting, but like you can figure out a way to schedule it in if it's a priority for you. But if it's not a priority for you, then like obviously it's going to show in the sense that it's going to suffer. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that I would ever allow weightlifting to suffer from any other thing that I'm doing. It is my number one priority, but I don't think that I should be like scared of going to school because I'm scared weightlifting would suffer, or working, or any of those things. So
I love it. I love it. Any parting advice for young weightlifters that just want to become the best that they can possibly be?
My 100% advice that applies to literally every single scenario is not to compare yourself to any other athlete. And that is like in the sense of how fast someone got good or how slow someone got good, how young they started, if they can handle doing 10s and you can't, like literally any scenario you can apply it to. If you're having insecurity about something, it's probably because you're comparing yourself to someone else instead of being proud of where you're at and who you are and what you can do, and just focusing on that piece.
Phenomenal advice. Where can people keep up with you and find out more about you?
On my Instagram at Jessica Lucero 9, and my Twitter at Jessica Lucero 97. And I have a Facebook group, or like an athlete page, and it's just Jessica Lucero.
Sweet. Thank you so much, Jess. This was phenomenal.
Yeah, it was good.
Talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.